Outside an exclusive art auction, a wealthy couple tipped their black valet a $1 bill, laughing as they told him to be grateful for the practice. They mocked him. They filmed him. They treated him like he was invisible, like he was nothing more than a servant whose only purpose was to make them feel superior. The woman joked about whether he could even read the parking instructions. The man bragged loudly about his guaranteed membership in the venue's elite investment consortium, never bothering to lower his voice because, after all, who cared what a valet overheard? But when that same valet walked onto the auction stage in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo and was introduced as Kevin H. Lyman, the owner, curator, and director of the entire gallery, the room fell absolutely silent. What happened next? Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss stories like this one.
All right, so this is crazy. Let me tell you what went down.
Now, let's get back to what happened that night. The Lyman Gallery wasn't the kind of place where regular people showed up. This place was tucked away in the heart of the city's arts district, and it only catered to people whose wealth could be measured in hundreds of millions. These were the folks whose names appeared on museum wings and university buildings. The architecture? Stunning. Baroque frames surrounding walls that displayed masterpieces worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes. Monets hung beside Basquiat's, and the soft murmur of privilege echoed through marble halls where champagne flowed and deals were made. Kevin H. Lyman moved through this world with purpose. At 42, he'd built something extraordinary from nothing but vision and sheer determination, transforming a modest gallery into one of the world's most exclusive auction houses. But Kevin had learned something crucial along the way. True character doesn't reveal itself in boardrooms or galas. It shows up in those quiet moments when people think no one is important, is watching. So a few times a year, Kevin did something most billionaires would never dream of doing. He'd put on a valet uniform, vest pressed, white gloves spotless, and work his own venue undercover. Not because he had to, because he wanted to see who his guests really were when they thought they were talking to someone who didn't matter. Tonight was one of those nights, and it was going to be a big one. They were auctioning off a rare Basquiat, expected to shatter records, but that wasn't even the main event. Tonight also happened to be the final review period for Consortium membership applications, the exclusive investment group Kevin had founded for serious collectors who valued integrity as much as art. Kevin had been running since sunrise. Meetings with curators about the African art collection, financial projections with his CFO. Then he'd slipped into that valet uniform to start the evening shift. His assistant, Jonathan, had questioned him about it earlier. "Boss, you own this place. Why put yourself through this?" Kevin had just smiled. Because power means nothing if you forget what it feels like to be dismissed. During a quiet moment between arriving guests, Kevin stepped into the staff lounge and pulled out something precious. A worn leather journal that had belonged to his grandfather. The pages were soft from decades of being handled, filled with observations about dignity, respect, and building something meaningful despite everything working against you. His grandfather had written these words in 1963. Jim Crow, systemic barriers. Being told over and over that success wasn't meant for people who looked like him, but he'd built something anyway. Kevin gave himself exactly 5 minutes to read before Marcus, one of the young valets working the north entrance, poked his head in. "Mr. Lyman, We've got some early arrivals, big names. Kevin closed the journal carefully and tucked it into his locker. Thank you, Marcus. I'll be right there. He walked back to the entrance portico, just as Victoria Chen Ashford was being helped from her town car. And Chen was a Consortium member and Kevin's mentor, one of the first people who'd believed in him when he was just a kid with a dream and a PowerPoint presentation. Tonight she carried a first edition catalogue from the gallery's inaugural auction 12 years ago. She always brought it to special events. Kevin opened her car door with practiced grace. Good evening, Mrs. Chen. She looked up and gave him one of those genuine smiles that actually reached her eyes. The kind of smile that saw him as both the valet greeting her and the man who'd built this empire from the ground up. Mr. Lyman, she said softly, playing along with his undercover work. You look well. I trust this evening will be enlightening. Kevin felt warmth at her understanding. I believe it will be, ma'am. Thank you. She moved on, but her eyes followed him as he returned to his position. She knew him well enough to understand that, when Kevin worked undercover, something important was about to happen. The evening rolled on in its usual rhythm. Luxury cars pulling up, wealthy guests stepping out in designer everything, programs rustling, champagne already flowing inside. Kevin greeted each arrival with professional courtesy, parking Maseratis and Rolls-Royces with the kind of precision that comes from owning 3 vintage cars yourself. And then, everything changed. Headlights cut through the evening darkness, and a Bentley Continental GT glided to a stop. The midnight blue paint gleamed like liquid sapphire under the golden lights. The driver's door opened. Earl C. McGurk stepped out of that Bentley like he owned the entire city block, and salt and pepper hair slicked back with way too much product. A custom suit that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. And an expression that just radiated pure entitlement, the kind that comes from never being told no in your entire life. From the passenger side came Ramona J. Graney, all sharp angles and designer labels. Her orange cocktail dress shimmered under the lights, and diamonds dripped from her ears and wrists like a waterfall of money. She looked Kevin up and down the way you might inspect a piece of furniture you're not sure you want to buy. Through the gallery's glass doors, Kevin could see Jonathan watching. His jaw was already clenched tight. Jonathan had seen this before. He knew what was coming. Kevin stepped forward, white-gloved hands clasped professionally, his expression warm and welcoming. Good evening, he said. Welcome to the Lyman Gallery. Earl didn't even look at him, and that's when everything started to fall apart. Earl stepped out of that Bentley like he was walking on a red carpet. He ran his hand along the car's hood with the kind of affection most people save for their children. Careful with her, Earl said, his tone completely flat and dismissive. She's worth more than you'll make in a lifetime. Kevin's smile didn't waver. Of course, sir. I'll treat her with the utmost care. Ramona emerged from the passenger side, her dress catching every bit of light. She looked Kevin up and down with this theatrical scrutiny that made everyone uncomfortable. Oh, honey, she said to Earl, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Do you think he can actually read the parking instructions? They're quite detailed. Earl chuckled, fishing the key fob from his pocket. I'm sure he'll figure it out. How hard can it be? Forward, backward, don't scratch the paint. He dangled the fob just out of Kevin's reach for a moment, like you'd tease a dog with a treat, before finally dropping it into his palm. Let the help handle it, darling. That's what they're here for. Kevin took the keys with practiced grace, keeping steady eye contact. I assure you, ma'am, I'm quite literate. Your vehicle will be parked safely. Ramona's laugh cut through the air like glass breaking. Oh, listen to that. Quite literate. How adorable. She grabbed Earl's arm. Earl, did you hear? He uses big words. Probably memorized them from the training manual, Earl said over his shoulder, not even bothering to lower his voice. Give him a participation trophy. Their laughter echoed across the marble steps as they disappeared through the bronze doors, already moving on to their next conversation, their next target, their next opportunity to remind everyone how important they thought they were. Kevin stood alone under those portico lights, the Bentley's keys warm in his gloved hand. Around him, the other valets exchanged knowing glances. Marcus caught Kevin's eye and shook his head slowly, like he couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. Kevin simply smiled. A small, patient smile that held secrets nobody could read. He slid behind the Bentley's wheel, adjusted the leather seat, and drove that $250,000 car toward the private lot with the kind of precision that only comes from years of experience. And his own collection included a vintage Aston Martin and a Tesla Roadster, but Earl and Ramona didn't need to know that. Not yet. The evening had only just begun. Kevin parked the Bentley perfectly and sat there for just a moment in the leather-wrapped silence. He allowed himself one deep breath before stepping back into character. As he walked back toward the entrance, Earl's voice carried across the courtyard like a foghorn, loud, obnoxious, and completely unconcerned with who might be listening. The Consortium vote is basically a done deal at this point, Earl announced to a small cluster of arriving guests, gesturing dramatically with a champagne flute he'd somehow already grabbed. My application's been fast-tracked. Kevin Lyman himself personally reviewed my portfolio. Kevin slowed his pace, staying just outside the circle of light where the guests stood talking. A distinguished silver-haired man in a charcoal suit raised an eyebrow. That's quite an endorsement. The Consortium is notoriously selective. When you bring the kind of capital I'm offering, Earl said, puffing out his chest like a peacock, doors don't just open, they fly off their hinges. Lyman would be a fool to pass on this opportunity. Ramona appeared beside him, her diamonds catching every photon of light in the area. Oh, it's already decided, darling. We're just here to make it official, and to pick up that gorgeous Rothko we've been eyeing. She giggled. Though between you and me, I find abstract art rather silly. But it's an investment, isn't it? Kevin's jaw tightened, just slightly. He turned to grab a parking ticket from his vest pocket, using the moment to reset his expression back to neutral. Oh, there you are, Ramona's voice sliced through the moment. She'd spotted him. Earl, the valet boy, is back. Kevin reached the valet podium, where the other attendants stood. Marcus cleared his throat quietly, a warning sound. Here, Ramona said, strutting over with this exaggerated display of generosity. She made a huge show of opening her tiny designer clutch, her diamond tennis bracelet, easily worth 6 figures, sliding up and down her wrist with every movement. She pulled out a single, crisp dollar bill and held it up to the light like she was inspecting currency at a bank. For your excellent service, she announced, loud enough for everyone in the vicinity to hear. She pressed that dollar into Kevin's gloved palm with theatrical charity. I'm sure this is more than you usually see in a week. Save it. Treat yourself to something nice. Earl burst out laughing. "Ramona, you're going to spoil him. Next thing you know, he'll expect this kind of generosity from everyone." Kevin looked down at that $1 bill, then back up at Ramona's self-satisfied smile. His fingers closed around it slowly, deliberately. "Your generosity is noted, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a weight that Ramona was way too self-absorbed to pick up on. "I'll be sure to remember this moment." "See?" Ramona turned to her little audience. "So polite. They train them well here." She linked arms with Earl and swept back toward the gallery entrance, already dismissing Kevin from her mind like yesterday's garbage. Behind the valet podium, Marcus let out a slow breath. "Boss, how much longer are you going to—" Kevin held up one finger, his eyes still tracking the McGurks as they walked away. "Patience, Marcus. Let them dig." "They're gonna need a ladder to get out of the hole they're making," another valet muttered. Kevin folded that dollar bill once, twice, 3 times, then tucked it carefully into his vest pocket, right over his heart. "I'm counting on it," he said quietly. The Lyman Gallery's grand reception hall glowed with soft amber light, illuminating walls covered in carefully curated masterpieces. Kevin moved through the space like a ghost, his valet vest making him functionally invisible to the champagne-sipping elite who swirled around in their designer clothes and borrowed confidence. He carried a silver tray of empty glasses he'd collected, the perfect excuse to linger near any conversation he wanted to hear. Earl and Ramona had planted themselves near the gallery's prized African art collection, a series of absolutely stunning Benin bronzes on loan from a private collector. Kevin had spent months negotiating to get these pieces here, recognizing their historical and artistic significance in a way that clearly sailed right over the McGurks' heads. "I mean, honestly," Ramona said, waving her champagne flute dismissively at a bronze depicting a warrior queen, "who pays millions for this primitive stuff? It looks like something from a high school art project." Earl leaned in to examine a ceremonial mask, his expression dripping with theatrical confusion. "I suppose it's very authentic. Is that what we're calling it now?" He actually snorted. "Give me a Monet any day. At least the Europeans knew what they were doing." Standing nearby was Kyoma, a young curator, a brilliant Nigerian scholar Kevin had personally recruited from Oxford. Her fingers tightened around her tablet. Her whole body went rigid. Kevin caught her eye and gave the slightest shake of his head. "Not yet." "The thing that really gets me," Earl continued, turning away from the collection entirely, "is how many of these events have been overrun with diversity hires. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for inclusion." He said the word like it physically hurt him. But standards are standards. You can't just lower the bar to make everyone feel good. Ramona nodded so vigorously that her earrings actually made noise. "Exactly. Just look around this room. Half these people probably only got their positions because of quotas. It cheapens the whole institution." Kevin's knuckles went white around that tray. He set it down on a nearby service table with deliberate precision, using the moment to force his features back to something resembling professional calm. "When we join the Consortium," Earl said, raising his voice so people around them could hear, "the first order of business is getting back to merit-based appointments. No more of this pandering nonsense." "Earl McGurk, is that you?" Kevin's head snapped up. Victoria Chen-Ashford, the Consortium's longest-serving board member and Kevin's mentor, was gliding toward them in an elegant jade silk gown. But her sharp eyes had locked onto Kevin first, widening with recognition. Kevin, I didn't realize you were, she began. Kevin turned slightly, catching her gaze. He touched his vest with one finger, then brought that same finger to his lips in the smallest possible gesture. His eyes said everything. Trust me. Please. Victoria was 73 years old and hadn't built a billion-dollar import empire by being slow on the uptake. Her expression shifted seamlessly, the recognition vanishing behind a mask of polite interest. Working tonight, she finished smoothly, like they were strangers. How industrious. Could you fetch me another glass of the pouilly fuissé? Of course, ma'am, Kevin said, his voice perfectly deferential. Right away. As he turned to leave, he heard Victoria redirect her attention to the McGurks. Mr. McGurk, I've been hoping to speak with you about your application. Such an interesting portfolio you've submitted. That word, interesting, dripped with ambiguity. Kevin allowed himself the ghost of a smile as he walked toward the bar. Victoria would keep them occupied, give them more rope. And Earl McGurk seemed absolutely determined to turn that rope into a noose. From across the room, Kioma caught his eye. Her expression asked the question everyone on staff was thinking. How much longer? Kevin glanced at his watch. The main auction started in 45 minutes. Soon, he mouthed silently. Very soon. Kevin was reviewing the evening's auction catalogue near the entrance when Earl's voice cut through the reception's gentle hum like a chainsaw. You! Valet! Kevin turned, his expression professionally neutral. Earl stood at the top of the marble stairs, actually snapping his fingers like he was calling a dog. I need my car brought around, now. I left my cigar case in the glove compartment. Kevin walked up the steps at a measured pace. Of course, sir. I'll retrieve it right away. Not the case, you idiot. The car. Bring the whole car around. I'm not having you pawing through my belongings. Ramona appeared beside her husband, already pulling out her phone. Oh, this should be good. Earl, he's going to take forever. You watch. Kevin accepted the valet ticket Earl literally thrust at him and headed to the private lot. He checked his watch as he walked. 7:47 p.m. The parking area was a 3-minute walk each way. He'd timed it precisely when designing the gallery's entire layout. Inside the Bentley, he found the cigar case immediately visible in the center console, and not even in the glove compartment. Earl had either lied or simply didn't care about accuracy when addressing the help. Kevin shifted the car into drive and headed back. 7:50 p.m. 3 minutes exactly. Earl stood at the curb, tapping his foot with theatrical impatience. Ramona had her phone raised, recording everything. Finally, Earl barked as Kevin pulled up. What took you so long? Did you stop for a joyride? 3 minutes, sir, Kevin said evenly, stepping out to open Earl's door. The parking area is 3 minutes too many. When I say now, I mean now. Earl snatched the cigar case from the console, then slammed the car door so hard the entire frame shuddered. Your response time is completely unacceptable. Ramona circled with her phone, narrating like she was hosting some twisted reality show. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you handle lazy staff. You don't reward incompetence. You call it out. She zoomed in on Kevin's face. Look at him. Doesn't even have the decency to apologize. Kevin stood beside the Bentley, hands clasped, his expression completely unchanged. Through the gallery's glass doors, he could see Jonathan watching with barely contained fury. Jonathan's hand was pressed flat against the glass, his jaw clenched so tight, it looked painful. Kevin caught his eye and shook his head. Just barely. Not yet. You know what? Earl said, making a theatrical show of checking his wallet and finding it stuffed with bills. I'm not tipping you this time. You should be grateful for the practice. Learn to be faster, and maybe next time you'll actually earn something. Grateful for the practice, Ramona repeated, laughing as she filmed. That's perfect. I'm absolutely posting this. How to maintain standards with service workers. My followers are going to eat this up. Earl stepped closer to Kevin, dropping his voice to what he probably thought was a confidential whisper. But Ramona's phone still caught every word. Let me give you some free advice, son. In life, there are people who matter and people who serve. Know which one you are, and you'll save yourself a lot of disappointment. Kevin's eyes met Earl's directly, unblinking. I know exactly who I am, Mr. McGurk. The question is whether you do. Earl's face twisted with confusion, then irritation. What's that supposed to mean? It means, Kevin said carefully, measuring each word, that appearances can be deceiving. Are you getting philosophical with me? Jesus Christ. Earl turned away dismissively. Ramona, let's go. I need a drink after dealing with this nonsense. They swept back inside, Ramona already typing furiously on her phone, probably crafting the perfect caption for her little humiliation post. Jonathan burst through the doors the second they disappeared. Boss, please, let me. Document everything, Kevin said quietly. Every word, every recording. I want timestamps on all of it. They're destroying their own application with every sentence that comes out of their mouths. I know. Kevin straightened his vest. That's exactly the point. Listen, if you're still with me at this point, I need to ask you something. This story is about to get wild. Like, you have no idea what's coming next. But here's the thing. Stories like this only reach people when you help share them. So if you're enjoying this, if you want to see more content about karma, justice, and people getting exactly what they deserve, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button right now. It takes literally 2 seconds, and it helps this channel grow so I can keep bringing you stories that actually matter. Plus, trust me when I tell you, the ending of this story is going to blow your mind. You don't want to miss what happens when Kevin finally reveals who he really is. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's get back to the story, because things are about to get absolutely unbelievable. Kevin was arranging champagne flutes on a service cart when he felt a presence beside him. Victoria Chen Ashford stood close enough that her voice wouldn't carry beyond the two of them. I've been watching you watch him all evening, she said softly, her Mandarin-accented English barely above a whisper. That man is digging his own grave with his mouth, and you're handing him a bigger shovel. Kevin didn't look up from the glasses. Mrs. Chen, I'm just doing my job. Don't insult my intelligence, Kevin. I've known you since you were 25 years old, pitching your gallery idea in my living room with nothing but passion and a PowerPoint presentation. She paused. Are you going to let him get away with this? Kevin's hands went still. He glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot, then met her eyes directly. I'm going to let him reveal exactly who he is. There's a difference. A slow smile spread across Victoria's weathered face. You always were patient. Your grandfather would be proud. He played the long game too. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. The McGurk application comes to vote tonight, doesn't it? After the auction concludes, The board convenes at 10. And you've been building your case all evening. It wasn't a question. Kevin adjusted a champagne flute that didn't actually need adjusting. A man's true character emerges when he believes there are no consequences, when he thinks he's speaking to someone who doesn't matter. The Consortium has weathered many storms, Victoria said quietly, but we've never survived by accepting men who measure worth by bank accounts alone. She touched his arm briefly, a gesture of solidarity. Do what needs to be done. You have my vote. She drifted away just as Earl's voice rose from across the reception hall, near the auction preview room. Kevin moved closer, staying behind a marble column. Earl had cornered Thomas, one of the junior auction coordinators, a nervous young man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked absolutely overwhelmed. Listen, Tommy. It is Tommy, right? Earl draped an arm around the younger man's shoulders, with completely fake friendliness. I'm going to be straight with you. That Rothko in lot 17, what's the reserve price? Thomas stammered. Sir, I'm not authorized to. Not authorized. I get it. Earl pulled out his wallet and extracted what looked like $500 bills. But here's the thing. I'm about to become a Consortium member. That makes us practically colleagues. And colleagues help each other out, don't they? He pressed the cash against Thomas's chest. I just need the reserve price, and maybe a heads up on who else is bidding seriously. Nothing crazy, just a little professional courtesy. Thomas's face had gone completely pale. Mr. McGurk, I could lose my position. Or you could make a very powerful friend. Earl's smile didn't reach his eyes at all. Your choice, Tommy. But I'd think very carefully about which side of this you want to be on. From behind the column, Kevin caught Thomas's panicked gaze. The young man had spotted him, recognizing him despite the valet vest. Kevin gave a subtle nod. Refuse him. Thomas straightened his spine. I'm sorry, Mr. McGurk. I can't help you. The auction house has strict ethical guidelines. He pushed the money back and walked away quickly, his hands visibly shaking. Earl stood there with those bills still in his hand, his expression darkening like a storm cloud rolling in. Ungrateful little problem, darling? Ramona appeared with fresh champagne. These people don't understand how the world actually works, Earl muttered, shoving the cash back into his wallet. They'd rather be poor and ethical than rich and practical. Kevin stepped back into the shadows and pulled out his phone. He typed a quick message to Jonathan. Add attempted bribery of staff to the record. Thomas will provide a statement. The response came immediately. This man is building a masterclass in what not to do. Kevin pocketed his phone, watching Earl and Ramona disappear into the preview room, already hunting for their next target. Indeed, he is, Kevin whispered to himself. Indeed, he is. The pre-auction reception was reaching its peak when Ramona's voice cut through the classical quartet's performance like a knife. You, Valet. Kevin turned from his position near the gallery's east entrance. Ramona was beckoning him over with this imperious wave, her champagne sloshing dangerously close to spilling. I need my wrap from the car. The black one. It's getting chilly in here. Kevin nodded. Of course, ma'am. I'll retrieve it immediately. He made the journey to the Bentley, found the black cashmere wrap draped across the back seat, and returned within 5 minutes. Finally, Ramona said, not even bothering to look at him as she shoved her champagne glass into his hand. She shook out the wrap, then froze. Wait. No. Not this one. The black one with the silver threading. This is the plain one. Kevin's expression stayed perfectly neutral. "I'll exchange it right away, ma'am." Another trip to the parking lot. The black wrap with silver threading was in the trunk. He returned and presented it to Ramona with professional courtesy. She examined it under the light, her lips pursing like she'd tasted something sour. "Actually, you know what? It's too formal. Bring me the burgundy shawl instead. It's in a fabric bag on the floor behind the passenger seat." Earl glanced up from his conversation with another guest. "Ramona, the auction starts in 20 minutes. "Then he'd better hurry," she said with fake sweetness. Kevin made the third trip, his professional composure completely intact, despite the obvious game being played. He found the burgundy shawl exactly where she'd described and returned to the reception hall. Ramona snatched it from his hands, shook it out with dramatic flair, then gasped like he'd handed her actual garbage. "It's wrinkled! Look at this!" She held up the shawl, which had exactly the kind of creases you'd expect from fabric that's been stored in a car. "Did you sit on this? Roll it into a ball?" "Ma'am, it was folded in the bag as you—" "Don't make excuses." Ramona's voice rose loud enough to turn heads all across the reception hall. "This is completely unacceptable. Earl, look at this. He's wrinkled my Hermes shawl." Earl strode over, examining the shawl with theatrical concern. "This is disgraceful. What kind of establishment allows this level of incompetence?" A small crowd had started to form, drawn by Ramona's volume and drama. "He should be fired," Ramona declared, her face flushed with manufactured outrage. "Immediately. I've never experienced such poor service in my life. Running me around like a dog. And then he can't even handle a simple shawl without destroying it." Earl stepped closer to Kevin, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was an intimidating register. "I'm going to speak to the owner about your attitude problem. Do you understand me? This kind of carelessness, this complete lack of respect for guests and their property, it's unacceptable." Kevin met Earl's eyes steadily, his hands clasped behind his back. The crowd had grown larger now, curious onlookers pretending not to watch while hanging on every single word. "By all means, sir," Kevin said, his voice carrying perfect courtesy, mixed with something else. Something that almost sounded like amusement. "I'm certain the owner would be very interested in your feedback." Earl's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you being smart with me?" "Not at all, Mr. McGurk. I'm simply agreeing that the owner should absolutely hear about your experience this evening. Every single detail of it." Ramona clutched Earl's arm, her diamonds glittering under the lights. "Did you hear that tone? He's mocking us. This is exactly what I'm talking about. No respect, no professionalism whatsoever." "I assure you," Kevin said calmly, "I have nothing but respect for those who deserve it." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Earl's face flushed deep crimson. "That's it. What's your name? I want your name right now." Kevin reached into his vest pocket with deliberate slowness. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Earl with a slight bow. Earl snatched it, glanced at it, then did a visible double-take. His expression shifted from fury to confusion in the span of about 2 seconds. The card read simply, "Kevin H. Lyman, founder and curator, Lyman Gallery." Ramona leaned over, squinting at the card. "What does it say?" "Earl, what?" But Earl was staring at Kevin now, really seeing him for the first time all evening. Recognition dawned slowly across his face, like the sun coming up over a battlefield. "The auction begins in 15 minutes, Kevin said softly. "I suggest you find your seats." He turned and walked away with perfect composure, leaving Earl standing there frozen, that business card trembling in his hand. The auction hall looked like something out of a dream. 300 seats upholstered in deep navy velvet, arranged in perfect rows beneath crystal chandeliers that caught and scattered light like captured stars. Kevin slipped through a private door marked "Staff Only" as guests began filing into the hall, their programs rustling, their voices dropping to hushed whispers. In his private office, Jonathan had already laid out what Kevin privately thought of as his armor. A custom Tom Ford tuxedo in midnight black, fabric so fine it seemed to drink in the light. A crisp white shirt that practically glowed. Platinum cufflinks engraved with his grandfather's initials. The man who'd taught him that dignity couldn't be stripped away by others, only surrendered. And Kevin stripped off that valet vest like he was shedding an old skin. The transformation took exactly 8 minutes. When he emerged, he was no longer the invisible man in service attire. He was Kevin H. Lyman, billionaire, curator, power broker. The man who'd built this empire from absolutely nothing but vision and determination that wouldn't quit. "They're in the third row," Jonathan murmured, handing him the evening's program. "Earl's already making a spectacle of himself." Kevin adjusted his bow tie in the mirror. Perfect. In the auction hall, the house lights began to dim. The lead auctioneer, Marcus Whitfield, a distinguished gentleman with a British accent that could make a phone book sound like poetry, took the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's exceptional collection. We begin with Lot 1, a stunning Modigliani sketch, authenticated in 1918. The bidding opened at $50,000. Earl's paddle shot up immediately, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. $60,000, he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. An elegant woman in the front row counted smoothly. 75. Earl's paddle flew up again. 100,000. Ramona leaned over to the couple sitting beside them, her stage whisper carrying across multiple rows. "Earl always gets what he wants. These people don't understand they're just driving up the price for him." The Modigliani was sold to Earl for 130,000, approximately 40,000 over its actual market value. He accepted the win with a triumphant smirk, completely unaware he'd just overpaid by a ridiculous margin. 3 more pieces came up. Earl bid aggressively on every single one, winning 2 and losing 1 to a phone bidder he couldn't see or intimidate. With each victory, his chest puffed out larger, his voice grew louder, and his confidence inflated. "Did you see that?" Ramona said to their increasingly uncomfortable neighbors. "My husband doesn't lose." The woman beside her smiled tightly and actually shifted her seat a few inches away. Marcus Whitfield cleared his throat, consulting his notes. The entire room's energy shifted. Everyone could feel something significant approaching. "Distinguished guests, we now arrive at the centerpiece of this evening's auction. But before we present the extraordinary Basquiat you've all been anticipating, and it is my great honor to welcome the visionary who made tonight possible." Earl leaned back in his seat, scanning the room, probably looking for Kevin Lyman, wondering what this mysterious owner looked like, whether he'd witnessed Earl's dominant bidding performance. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus continued, his voice swelling with genuine admiration, "the man who transformed this gallery from a dream into one of the world's premier auction houses. A collector whose eye for emerging artists has become legendary. A philanthropist whose scholarship programs have literally changed countless lives. Please join me in welcoming the founder and curator of the Lyman Gallery, Mr. Kevin H. Lyman." The room erupted in applause. Kevin stepped onto the stage from the side entrance, his Tom Ford tuxedo catching the spotlight like it was designed for exactly this moment. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you belong. The applause swelled, growing louder. And then, slowly, as recognition began to ripple through the crowd like a wave, gasps began to punctuate the clapping. Earl McGurk sat frozen in the third row, his paddle hanging limp in his hand. His face had gone the color of old newspaper. Beside him, Ramona's mouth had actually fallen open, her champagne glass tilted at a dangerous angle, completely forgotten. Kevin reached the podium, placed both hands on its edges, and smiled warmly at the assembled guests. His eyes swept the room with professional grace, pausing for just a fraction of a second on row 3. "Good evening," he said, his voice rich and commanding. "Thank you all for joining us on this remarkable night." Kevin stood at that podium, bathed in the spotlight, while 300 of the world's wealthiest art collectors rose to their feet. The applause rolled over him like a physical force, genuine and warm, the kind of recognition you can only earn through years of expertise and unwavering integrity. In the third row, Earl McGurk's champagne flute slipped from his fingers. The crystal shattered against the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Champagne splashed across Ramona's designer shoes, across the velvet seats, across Earl's $1,000 trousers. But neither of them moved. They just sat there, completely paralyzed. Statues carved from pure horror. Ramona's gasp was audible even over the applause. Her hand flew to her mouth, and diamonds glittering on those same fingers that had filmed Kevin mocked him, dismissed him as barely human just hours ago. Kevin waited for the applause to settle, his expression gracious and composed. When the room finally quieted, he began to speak. "Thank you. Tonight, we have the privilege of witnessing not just transactions, but the continuation of conversations that began centuries ago. Art is memory made visible, struggle made beautiful, truth made tangible." He gestured to the massive screen behind him, where an image of the evening's Basquiat appeared, a riot of color and meaning, crowns and bones and prophetic text layered with genius. Jean-Michel Basquiat understood something profound, that value isn't assigned by institutions or markets, but by the depth of what we're willing to see, and the courage to see it truly. And this particular piece, Throne of the Invisible King, was painted in 1983, during a period when Basquiat was interrogating fundamental questions about power, race, and recognition. Earl had started to sweat, like visibly sweating. Actual beads of perspiration are forming on his forehead. Beside him, Ramona had pressed herself back into her seat, like she was trying to disappear into the upholstery itself. Kevin continued, his expertise evident in every single sentence. He spoke about Basquiat's influences, jazz, Grey's Anatomy, comic books, and street culture. He drew connections to Picasso, to Rauschenberg, to the Harlem Renaissance. His knowledge was encyclopedic. His passion was undeniable. And with every word, Earl and Ramona sank lower in their seats. "Before we begin bidding on this extraordinary piece," Kevin said, his tone shifting just slightly, "I want to take a moment to thank the people who make evenings like this possible." Whispers had started spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Heads were turning toward the third row. Someone had recognized the McGurks. Someone had put the pieces together. "Our curators, our catalogers, our security team," Kevin continued, "and especially our exceptional valet team, who demonstrate every single night that true service is an art form deserving of the utmost respect. He paused, letting those words settle over the room like snow. These individuals handle priceless vehicles, manage impossibly complex logistics, and interact with our guests with unfailing professionalism. They are often the very first faces people see when they arrive, and their dedication sets the tone for the entire evening. Some guests understand this. Others— His eyes found Earl's across the expanse of that auction hall. Still have much to learn about respect. The silence was absolutely deafening. Earl's face had progressed from pale to crimson, a flush creeping up his neck like rising floodwater. Ramona had begun to tremble visibly, her whole body shaking. "Now," Kevin said, his voice brightening as if nothing unusual had occurred whatsoever. "Shall we begin? The opening bid for Throne of the Invisible King is set at $4 million. The room remained electric, crackling with speculation, and barely contained gossip. Phones were being surreptitiously checked under programs. The society reporter from Art World magazine was typing so furiously that her thumbs were probably going to cramp. Victoria Chen Ashford, seated in the front row like royalty, caught Kevin's eye and offered the smallest nod of approval. In the third row, Earl McGurk sat frozen solid, realizing with dawning terror that the valet he'd humiliated, the man he'd dismissed as worthless, as nothing, now controlled not just this auction, but his entire future in this world. Kevin smiled warmly at the audience. "Do I hear 4 million?" A paddle rose confidently in the back, and the reckoning began. The bidding war for Throne of the Invisible King was absolutely fierce. Paddles flew up across the room like birds taking flight. 5 million, 6 million, 7.5 million. Earl never raised his paddle once, not even a twitch. He just sat there motionless, a man watching his entire carefully constructed world collapse in real time. 8 million, called a phone bidder. 8.2, countered a collector from Dubai. 9 million, Victoria Chen Ashford said calmly from the front row, her paddle raised with the kind of quiet authority that comes from decades of knowing your own worth. The room went completely silent. No counteroffers came. "Sold!" Marcus Whitfield's gavel struck with finality. $9 million to paddle number 7. Victoria turned slightly, caught Kevin's eye across the hall, and actually winked. Applause erupted, a new auction record for the gallery, but Kevin barely acknowledged it. He stepped back to the podium, and every person in that room could sense that something more was coming. "Before we conclude this evening," Kevin said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hushed space, "the Consortium board has asked me to announce this season's membership decisions." Earl's head snapped up like he'd been slapped. Ramona gripped his arm with fingers gone white at the knuckles. "The Lyman Consortium was founded on principles my grandfather taught me when I was young. That wealth without character is just poverty in expensive clothing. We seek members who embody integrity, respect, vision, and above all, character. The kind that reveals itself not in boardrooms or galas, but in how we treat people we believe are powerless to affect us." He pulled out a small card, though everyone in the room knew he'd memorized every single word. "This season, we received 43 applications. After careful deliberation, the board is pleased to welcome 12 new members." He read through 11 names slowly, clearly. Each recipient stood to gracious applause, champagne corks popping, handshakes exchanged, congratulations flowing. Earl leaned so far forward in his seat that he was practically levitating, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like his teeth might crack. "Regarding the final application," Kevin said, and the entire room went absolutely still. "Mr. Earl C. McGurk." Earl half rose from his seat, his expression a mixture of desperate hope and barely contained panic. Kevin's eyes met his directly across that space. No warmth, no mercy, just truth. "Your application has been carefully reviewed, including extensive observations from this evening. After thorough consideration by the full board, I'm afraid we've found a fundamental incompatibility with our values. Your application is denied." "What?" Earl's voice cracked across the room like breaking glass. "That's impossible. You can't. This is a done deal. I was promised—" "You were promised nothing, Mr. McGurk, and tonight you've demonstrated precisely why." Earl stumbled into the aisle, his face turning purple with rage. "This is discrimination. I'll sue this entire organization. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," Kevin said quietly, his voice somehow carrying to every corner of that hall. "That's the problem. You can't do this because of some parking lot misunderstanding. I'll destroy you. Two security guards materialized at Earl's elbows like ghosts. Marcus and David, the exact same men who'd worked valet duty earlier, who'd watched Earl's cruelty firsthand with their own eyes. They wore earpieces now, professional security attire, but their eyes held something unmistakable. Satisfaction. "Sir, we need to escort you out," Marcus said firmly but professionally. "Don't you dare touch me. Ramona. Tell them, Ramona." But Ramona had already gathered her things, that wrinkled Hermes shawl, her clutch, her dignity, what was left of it, and was practically running toward the side exit. Her head was down, her face hidden, desperate to escape before someone could film her the way she'd filmed Kevin. Earl was guided, not roughly, but absolutely inexorably, toward the rear doors. His protests echoed back through the hall until those heavy doors finally closed, cutting off his voice mid-sentence like someone hitting a mute button. The room stayed silent for one long beat. Then Victoria Chen Ashford began to clap. Slowly at first. Then others joined in. The applause wasn't triumphant or mean-spirited. It was something deeper. Relief. Affirmation. A collective exhale from people who just witnessed quiet justice being served. 6 weeks later, Kevin stood at a podium in the gallery's education wing, which had been renamed the Dignity and Service Center. 50 scholarship recipients sat before him, valets, servers, cleaners, drivers, all kinds of service workers. Each one was receiving funding for education, business development, or career advancement. Real money, real opportunity, real change. "Someone once tried to teach me that there are people who matter and people who serve," Kevin told them, his voice carrying that same quiet authority. They were half right. Some people serve. But service, real service, is how all people of character actually matter. The scholarship fund had been endowed with $5 million. It would transform hundreds of lives over the years to come. Earl's cruelty had been alchemized, transformed, into an opportunity for others. 1 month after that, on a crisp autumn evening, Kevin H. Lyman stood beneath the Lyman Gallery's portico. He was wearing a valet vest and white gloves again. A Mercedes pulled up, and an elegant older couple stepped out. "Good evening," Kevin said warmly. "Welcome to the Lyman Gallery." The gentleman actually stopped and smiled at him, really saw him as a person. "Thank you so much. Beautiful evening, isn't it?" "It is indeed, sir." As Kevin drove their car to the lot, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. The vest, didn't diminish him. It never had. It never could. Because true power doesn't need a title. It only needs truth. So that's the story of how Kevin H. Lyman taught Earl and Ramona McGurk the most expensive lesson of their lives. They tried to humiliate a man they saw as beneath them, never realizing he owned everything they wanted. If you enjoyed this story, I've got a question for you. What would you have done in Kevin's position? Would you have revealed yourself immediately? Or would you have let them dig that hole even deeper? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And listen, if you made it all the way to the end of this story, you're exactly the kind of person I want in this community. So do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story about karma, justice, and people getting exactly what they deserve. I've got more incredible stories coming your way. Stories about underdogs who win, bullies who lose, and the beautiful moment when truth finally comes to light. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.